So we are reading from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 12th chapter, entitled Birth of Emperor Parikshit. And we're on text 4. Huh?
Chapter 4.
Text 4. Shri Sutta Uvacha Api Pala Dharma Rasha Vitravad Vajayan Bhaja
Pitruvasaranjayan Praja
Nishpriha sarvakamebhya
Nisriha Sarvakamebhya
Vishwapadan sevaya.
Krishna Padanusevaya.
Since we don't have very many chanters, I was just going to go ahead. Sutta Uvacha,
Sutta
Sri Sutta Goswami said,
said,
Abhibhala administered prosperity.
administered prosperity.
Dharmaraja,
Dharmaraja,
King Yudhisthira,
King Yudhishthira,
Trivat,
Pitravat,
exactly like his father.
exactly like his father.
Nanjayan,
Rajayan,
pleasing.
Rishidi,
I can't say that. Praja,
Raja,
all those who took birth.
all those who took birth.
Nishpriha,
Nisriha,
without personal ambition.
without personal ambition.
Sarva, all.
All.
Kamedya,
Kamedya,
from sense gratification.
from sense gratification.
Krishnapada,
Krishnapada,
the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna.
lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna.
Amsevaya,
Shivaya,
by dint of rendering continuous service.
by dint of rendering continuous service.
Translation. Sri Sutta Goswami said, Emperor Yudhisthira administered generously to everyone during his reign. He was exactly like his father. He had no personal ambition and was freed from all sorts of sense gratification because of his continuous service unto the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. As mentioned in our introduction, there is a need for the science of Krishna in human society for all the suffering humanity of the world. And we simply request the leading personalities of all nations to take to the science of Krishna for their own good, for the good of society, and for the good of all the people of the world. So it is confirmed herein by the example of Maharaj Yudhisthira, personality of goodness. In India, the people hanker after Ram Raja because the personality of Godhead was the ideal king, and all other kings or emperors in India controlled the destiny of the world for the prosperity of every living being who took birth on the earth. Herein, the word Praja is significant. The etymological import of the word is that which is born. On the earth, there are many species of life, from the aquatics up to the perfect human beings, and all are known as Prajas. Lord Brahma, the creator of this particular universe, is known as the Prajapati because he is the grandfather of all who have taken birth. Thus, Praja is used in a broader sense than it is now used. I'm going to stop there. I think I'm going to stop periodically. It's quite a long purport. I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble with my book. It's interesting to me because I was just reading before I walked down the steps a book speaking about Maharaj Yudhisthira, but before this happened. So if you look in previous chapters of this canto, starting with chapter 9, you'll hear that Maharaj Yudhisthira went through some procrastination before he took on the position of being the emperor. And he was lamenting over the fact, or attributing his lamentation to what he considered to be the fact that so many people had died because of his material desire to be the king. And based on the desire to put him in the throne, either because of his desire, because of other people's desire. So many people were unnecessarily slaughtered. And he thought that the atonement for that was that he should not accept the kingdom, but rather he should go off and perform austerities and purify himself of the sin of having created such havoc in society. When we hear Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna came up with a bunch of reasons why he shouldn't fight. And many of them are the same reasons that now Yudhisthira is agreeing after the fact that we shouldn't have fought. So many widows are there, people are homeless, innocent people killed, the society is disrupted because all the senior members of society, especially Grandfather Bhishma, is laying on the battlefield full of arrows, and Drona is dead, and so many great souls were killed, and it's all my fault. So he was feeling like this, and as a result, he was thinking I should just, used to have a song to school, nobody likes me, I should just go eat worms. Everybody hates me, nobody likes me, I should just go eat worms. So Yudhisthira was kind of thinking that way. He didn't want to eat worms, but he did want to eat humble pie, and he thought that by taking this position, he was being humble. Many people, including the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself, tried to convince Yudhisthira otherwise, but to no avail. And that's what I'm reading upstairs. I'm reading Krishna's arguments against Yudhisthira's. It's okay, you can laugh. I'm fine with that. It shows you're alive, which is living is good. Reaction to it. Sorry. No, don't be sorry. It's okay. It's better than the Z sound. It's better than. No. So Maharaj Yudhisthira was hearing even from the Supreme Lord, and in in Krishna's attempt to convince Yudhisthira that he was improper in his thought that he should renounce everything and just go to the forest and do meditation, severe austerities to repent. He spoke to him what's called the Kama Gita. And the Kama Gita it stems from the idea that at the root of Yudhisthira's suffering, and at the root of all of our suffering, is kama, or lust, the desire for some kind of material situation which will make us feel better. And usually we associate lust with, gender, getting together with another gender and having some kind of sexual connection. But that's not the only sphere of lust. Lust is all pervading, and it can be very, very subtle, and it can make us forget who we are, just like it making Yudhisthira forget who we are. And what was he lusty about? He wasn't lusty after women, but he was lusty after a conception of himself, which made him feel holier than thou, holier than everybody else. And therefore, he wanted to display that to everybody else on a very subtle level. He wanted to display that to everybody else by going off and performing austerities. And also at the same time, incidentally, shirking his responsibility, which was particularly uncomfortable because everybody wonders about war and the killing in war. But when war is over, no one wins. There's no winning. There's one person who kills more people than the other. And he may get some accolades, or maybe get some land, or get some more power. But really, he inherits a disheveled, demoralized, pathetic situation after the war is over. People are not happy to follow him. They're following him because they have a proverbial gun at their head. And the landscape is destroyed. Families are broken up. People are in mourning. And there's no one happy on either side. Everybody has lost somebody. There's been deaths on both sides. So there's some illusion that I'll create a situation which will be good for me. And this is something that is inherent in lust. If you look outside, you go driving around, as I have been a little bit driving around, you see everybody's very lusty after so many things, right? After so many material things, after eating in so many horrible places and eating so many horrible things, after wearing so many different clothes, after acquiring so many different goods, after praying to God for so many different things. If I just had this, I could be a house by the sea and DVD, Swaminjai, Jagadish, Hari. There's so many different prayers and so many different religious and political and social efforts being made to satisfy my lust. That's really the bottom line. That's what it is. And the underlying thing that says satisfy my lust is because I think that by satisfying my lust, I will become happy. And that's what I'm here for, right? Krishna created this material world. God created, if there is God, he created the material world. And if it isn't God that created it, whoever created it, whatever created it, the ultimate understanding is that it's here for me, for my enjoyment. And, you know, when you multiply that by billions, and you think everybody is thinking that they want enjoyment. And the problem comes down to the fact that there's a finite number of objects. There's a finite, even material elements. There's a finite amount of stuff that we can tap into to satisfy an insatiable amount of desire that's multiplied by billions. So the result of that has got to be a problem. There can't be anything good coming of that. And so they, you know, inevitably people bump into each other, bang into each other, fight over each other for that limited amount of stuff. And the result is thievery and envy and anger and what all the results we see. And Yudhisthira is seeing. And he's thinking it's my fault. Don't be so proud. It's lustful. Don't be so proud, because lust is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. It was, you know, actually Lord Brahma is the original, the semi-original creator of that. But it's there for a purpose, because we have to step outside of the realm of lust in order to achieve perfection. In order to achieve the happiness we're looking for, we have to recognize the fine roots of lust that may be in our heart. And until we see them, until we destroy them, we're going to be subjected to suffering and making other people suffer. And Yudhisthira hasn't, before this chapter, Yudhisthira hadn't realized that. And therefore, he was just transplanting one kind of lust with another kind of lust. And therefore, he didn't want to do his job. Because the motivation for doing his job was the wrong motivation. He wasn't really thinking of pleasing the Supreme Lord. He was thinking of, this isn't going to satisfy me. If I do this, I'm going to be unhappy. I'm going to be miserable doing this. This is horrible. All these people suffered because of me, and because I'm at the center of the universe, and I don't want to suffer the karma for causing them to suffer. Therefore, I should just go to the forest and do austerity. All the wrong reasons. Beginning with lust. All permeations of lust. So when we look at that factor, that lust factor, we have to be able to look at it more broadly, because it's really not just about sex desire. It's about desire, period. And the desire is separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead for me to massage my lower nature, my misconception that it's all about me. So, you know, we know, because it had happened in the 9th chapter, that Krishna was unsuccessful in convincing Yudhisthira that what he should do was be the king. And so we read in the 9th chapter of this canto that Krishna arranged for Yudhisthira to go with grandfather Bhishma. And actually in the Mahabharata, the Bhishma Parva is a very long part of the Mahabharata. And this Bhagavatam, it's only one chapter, not even one chapter. And we hear very little of the instruction. But, and there was statesmanship instruction and so many other instructions after the realization, after Yudhisthira finally accepted the idea that he should rule, then he got instructions how to rule. But one verse that Grandfather Bhishma says that we have to understand, even though he says no one can understand it, no one can understand the plan of the Lord Sri Krishna. Because even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively about it, still they are bewildered. And the reason they're bewildered is because of lust. The reason that we are bewildered is because of lust. And so knowing what we know, because really the only solution to taking lust out of the heart is association with saintly. And by Krishna's grace, we have that association in the form ultimately of Srila Prabhupada and our disciplic succession. And Srila Prabhupada left us legacy of the Bhagavatam so that we can understand at least who our enemy is, who our real enemy is, and who our real friend is. And Yudhisthira kind of transformed from being his own enemy to a friend of the people. And when I was reading this purport yesterday, because Gopal told me that he gave me this in the sequence of verses that people were talking about. And I thought it's a perfect verse for New Year's. Because New Year's, everybody is out there trying to enjoy. I've gotten so many messages on my phone in form of videos and pictures and all kinds of weird sounds that, that it's New Year's. You're supposed to go out and enjoy. I heard there's a carnival here that everyone's going to go and have, bash, try to enjoy. At midnight, I got woken up by fireworks, boom, 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 boom. They only lasted a few minutes in New York. In America, they go on for hours and hours and hours. And they have this symbolism that in Madison Square Garden in the middle of New York City, they have this huge ball. And this ball throughout the year goes up, 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 until it gets to the very top of something. And then on New Year's Eve at midnight, the ball comes down. And it's like the myth of Sisyphus. If you know the myth of Sisyphus, that Sisyphus rolled this heavy stone up a hill. And then when he got to the top, it just rolled back down. And he would spend his life kind of rolling it up. That's what we do. We spend our life pushing this ball up, 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 and it gets to the end and we think, Happy New Year. And then now is another chance as if it's going to be any different from yesterday, right? Because it's really only 24 hours ago. Nothing has significantly changed in that 24 hours, just let you know that. But everybody's thinking it's a new year. It's a new opportunity for me to enjoy the material world. There must be something new out here that I can taste that I haven't tasted before. And somehow I'm going to figure out how I can enjoy better. So it's interesting how Yudhisthira ruled the kingdom. And I'm going to go on reading if I can remember where I was. Okay. Maharaj Yudhisthira knew this science of Krishna very well. By knowing the science of Krishna, one can become the most perfect man in the world. That's the highest aspiration, right? Most perfect man in the world. Unless one has knowledge of this science, all qualifications and doctorate diplomas acquired by academic education are spoiled and useless. My grandson is just about to go into the university. And my daughter called me at midnight last night to say Happy New Year. Bless her. And she didn't realize the time difference. She's but they're thinking, oh, this is a dawn of a new age, the age of Aquarius, we used to call it. But, there were songs about it. that now it's going to be different. Something is going to happen. The sun's going to shift in its past, and then something is going to happen, and we're going to have new opportunities for sense gratification. There'll be a new iPhone or something like that. a new preparation. Someone will make something new in the kitchen, and everyone will like it. But we struggle to find our happiness. But here, Srila Prabhupada is saying, and Yudhisthira is realizing, that by knowing the science of Krishna, one can become the most perfect man in the world. And unless one has knowledge of the science, all qualifications and doctorate diplomas acquired by academic education are spoiled and useless. Actually, in Sri Upanishad, Prabhupada speaks about different kinds of persons who have reached the pinnacle of their success in terms of knowledge and in terms of power of different kinds, political power, religious power. And if you look at the end of the purport of the 12th verse in Sri Upanishad, if anyone has one, I can read it. But basically what it says is that these people are the most culpable people on the earth because they've achieved a position of success which has put them in control of others, which has put them in a position where they're directing the behavior of others. Their behavior is emulated by others. And now the common word is influencer. Yet Acharya Tishrestas is what Krishna says. But now we say influencer. And who are the influencers? Are they on TikTok? They're idiots. Who are they? We don't have any idea that somehow or other they have a lot of followers. And so the companies send them so many incentives so that they'll broadcast their material product as the source of eliminating material desire. And because these people are influencers, they can encourage other people to think the way they think. They have some city, perhaps, and where they're able to convince people that this kind of enjoyment will actually give them the happiness that they are looking for. And yet it never works. And the influences go up and then they go down. And everyone dies. What to do? They're just celebrating in America the death of one of our former presidents who died at 100 years old. And so they're looking at all the things he did great that now they think are great because he's dead. But when he did them, they weren't thinking they were great. And they're lamenting over the fact that perhaps they didn't notice how great they actually were. Such is life. Maharaj Yudhisthira knew this science of Krishna very well, for it is stated here that by continuous cultivation of this science, by continuous devotional service to the Lord, Krishna has acquired the qualification of administering, he has acquired the qualification of administering the state. The father is sometimes seemingly cruel to the son, but that does not mean that the father has lost the qualification to be a father. That's questionable in this society. At least in the West now, it used to be that if a child was having difficulty and the teacher reprimanded him, they considered that to be a proper result. Now, if the teacher reprimands him, then the parents go and complain about the teacher. And I've heard even in India, maybe you can correct me, that a teacher, it's being frowned upon to fail anybody. You can't say, in the West, this has been going on for a while, that you can't tell a child, even a 15-year-old child, you can't tell a child that he failed the course because it might hurt his inner self-esteem, and we wouldn't want to do that. So therefore, we have a nebulous scale of achievement that isn't clear because no one can fail. But Vedic scenario is different. That the teacher is the person who tells the child that this isn't right. If you do this, you will fail. And if you've done this, you have failed, but you can correct it. And this is the way to correct it. And the child, because he was trained to be respectful of seniors, and particularly because he's been put in the care of someone who knows what is right and what is wrong, he's receptive to learn these things. And this is Yudhisthira's history. And not only is it Yudhisthira's history, but it's Maharaj Parikit's history. Because the interesting thing is that if you look at the title of this chapter, it's the birth of Emperor Parikit. And the previous chapter is the glorification of Maharaj Parikit, because everyone knew he was going to be born. Everybody knew he was going to be born. Everybody knew he was going to be born because Krishna had already saved him in the womb. It's the whole end of this section of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is trying to introduce us to Maharaj Parikit, because Maharaj Parikit is the perfect hearer of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Yudhisthira becomes an instrument in harboring in Maharaj Parikit's reign. But here, Prabhupada is talking about the qualification of Maharaj Yudhisthira as the king. And we understand that just like a father, the king is supposed to educate the project, the citizens, and direct them to do the right thing. We don't see that necessarily in modern culture. And so even though it's a new year, it's the same old, and that everybody is just trying to enjoy themselves, and the result of the thing is going to be another mess. It's got to be. There's no alternative about it. But the message here that Yudhisthira himself had to go through and teach us by his own experience, and now in this first part of this chapter, he's coming out successful. And it's not going to be for very long either. He doesn't stay the emperor for very long in relation to the other things that happen. But still, he had an obligation. And the obligation he had was not to leave and do penance to save himself. But the obligation that he had was to make society more functional, to teach the people the proper way to think and to behave, in order for them to find ultimate happiness. And to find ultimate happiness requires removing lust from the heart. Very, very subtle lust. Not only gross lust, which somehow is becoming more and more acceptable in the world in general, and not only acceptable, but encouraged. We see the way people dress, the way they behave, men and women, I see shocking sometimes, because I'm so used to seeing India in a different light. And when I come to certain places and I see the signage, I see things that are entering into the Indian culture. I can't call it Vedic culture, into the Indian culture, which tell us that there's going to be disaster here, just like there's disaster in the West. And so, unless somebody steps forward and takes some initiative to really tell the truth. And this is what Krishna and ultimately Grandfather Bhishma did to Yudhisthira. Ordinarily we see someone sad and they're crying. We go, oh, you poor thing, I'm so sorry. Let me, I understand, I completely understand. But Grandfather Bhishma and Krishna, neither of them took that position towards Yudhisthira. Instead, they said, let me tell you the truth. You are in illusion. And you need to be straightened out, because if you stay in this illusion, you will not make yourself happy, and you won't be able to make anybody else happy either. Not in this life, nor the next, because karmically, your retribution, if there is need for such a thing in this life, is that you take shelter of Krishna, take shelter of the Supreme Lord, realize that you didn't do anything, that everything is arranged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are not the doer. The material world doesn't revolve around you. Believe it or not. It doesn't revolve around us. We're just tiny, insignificant beings in this material. So therefore, how can we have that much of an impact? Grandfather Bhishma looked at Yudhisthira and said, who could understand why such great people like you suffered so much? But no one can understand the plan of Shri Krishna. And that even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, still they're bewildered. So now you're bewildered, and therefore you should understand that if you really want to make it right, what you need to do is, first of all, come in contact with your own spiritual knowledge and put it to practice and take the responsibility for training the people who are now under you. So in this purport, we understand now Yudhisthira's transformation. And Prabhupada is speaking about how Yudhisthira took that responsibility seriously and began to rule the kingdom in such a way, notice, that he fixed or he worked on helping those who were suffering by taking care of their material needs. Right? He didn't ignore the material needs. Sometimes we do that. We go all the way the other way, and someone comes to us and says, I'm having a hard time, and you just say, chant better rounds. But that doesn't necessarily work. Because there's a material need, and you need to find out what that material need is, and maybe that needs to be fixed. Maybe you need better association. Maybe you need something to eat. Maybe you need money to pay your rent. Maybe you're sick, you need to go to a doctor. These things have to be taken care of. It's not like our spiritual need is separate from our practical need. But on the other hand, the practical need, if met, will not satisfy us unless the spiritual need is also taken care of. We have to do both things at the same time. And this is a trick that I've been talking about a lot. The fact of balancing our material needs with our spiritual needs so that we don't become lopsided. Because if we become lopsided, first of all, we'll be unhappy and no one will be attracted to Krishna consciousness. You know, in this material world, people aren't attracted to severe austerity. So if you tell them you'll become Krishna conscious by standing on your toes for 10,000 years, you know, and you'll get mystical powers, they're not thinking, okay, that's what I want to do. They're thinking, nuts. There's no way. It's not going to happen. So we need to combine our understanding of the spiritual potency of practice of Krishna consciousness and the physical and mental societal needs of the people in practical parlance. So this is what we see that Yudhisthira did. He took care of every aspect of the society systematically. Fortunately, he had 4 competent helpers, his brothers, and they all were working together. But because Yudhisthira was so impeccable in his behavior, everybody was willing to follow his lead. He didn't have to force anybody. There's a description of the reasons that we surrender, quote unquote. Like someone, you know, there used to be movies, I don't know what you watched here, but someone holds a gun at your head and the guy stands up and he puts his hands in the air and says, I surrender. But that surrender is out of fear. It's not voluntary. And as soon as he gets the opportunity, he's going to take that gun away from you and turn it on you. Because you're holding him captive and he's surrendering, but he's not really surrendering. Right? So that surrender out of fear is the lowest level of surrender. And then there's surrender out of remuneration. I pay you, and therefore you do what I say. That doesn't last for very long either, because if someone else offers me more, then I'll go to him. There's no inherent loyalty there. And then there's surrender because it's the right thing to do. And you know, I want good karma. I want to do the right thing, and I surrender. That's a little bit higher, but ultimately the highest surrender is because of love, ultimate respect. If I love Krishna, then I have no problem surrendering to him. And that's what ultimately happens for Yudhisthira. And the people that work under him is that love that he has is so contagious and so wonderful to be in the association of, that the people willingly surrender to him. Prabhupada talks about Ram Raja. The same thing, because Lord Ram was so loved and so lovable. His behavior was so impeccable. And when he gave himself to somebody, when he took care of somebody, he took care of them forever. He even said, if someone comes to me just once and says, from this point on, I surrender unto you, then from that point on, I will take care of them forever, forever. And with Tribhishan, we saw, people said, oh, he's a demon, watch out, he's Ravana's brother. But he comes to me and he says, I surrender unto you, and immediately I take care of you. So because he was so concerned and so genuinely affectionate to, in a realistic way, to both the soul of the living entity and the external covering of the living entity, therefore living entities humans were enthusiastic to serve under him. And even if animals, the nature was peaceful and productive and reciprocal. Whereas here, we find that the unlimited lust of the society at large milks the earth to death. And ultimately what happens? You're in the middle of the winter and it's 95 degrees outside. There's no rain. And what to do? Because we're wreaking havoc on the earth by our lust. So, reading on, Maharaj Yudhisthira knew the science of Krishna very well, for it is stated here that by continuous cultivation of this science, or by continuous devotional service to the Lord, Krishna acquired the qualification of administering the state. The father is sometimes seemingly cruel to the son, but that does not mean that the father has lost the qualification to be a father. The father is always a father because he always has the good of the son at heart. The father wants every one of his sons to become a better man than himself. Therefore, a king like Maharaj Yudhisthira, who was the personality of goodness, wanted everyone under his administration, especially human beings who have better developed consciousness, to become devotees of Lord Krishna, so that everyone can become free from the trifles of material existence. His motto of administration, this is Yudhisthira's motto, was all good for the citizens. We had a motto for the SPT, it was more devotees, happier devotees. For as personified goodness, he knew perfectly well that what is actually good for them. He conducted the administration on that principle and not on the Rakshasi demoniac principle of sense gratification. We see one thing when I was talking to my daughter this morning, I asked her how she felt about the upcoming year under the tutelage of President Trump. And she said, my head is still in the sand. In other words, she's not looking. Camel sticks his head in the sand. And he thinks he's safe. The rabbit closes his eyes and he thinks he's safe. But safety is not really what you don't see. It's what you experience. It has to be something else. So, you get somebody who has a lot of power and a lot of money, but no moral standard and no moral compass whatsoever, and cares about no one but himself. You're going to have problematic rule. And even if it's in the guise of caring, because it isn't genuine caring, because it can't be genuine caring, because I have no idea who you are. I have no idea what you really need. I think like myself, if I give myself a lot of stuff, it makes me feel satisfied for 10 minutes, and I have a lot of money, and I can get more stuff, and I can get more stuff, and therefore I feel that I always have happiness just around the corner because I never run out of supplies. But to the average citizen is always questing for happiness in the material level is just one frustration after another. They never have enough. They never have enough stuff. They never have enough money to get stuff. They never have enough good relationships with people. They're always in anxiety. And that anxiety causes more strife and confusion in society at large. So if we really want to have a happy new year, then we have to change our focus. We have to, at least for ourselves within our community and with those who we have influence, to offer them the opportunity to really be happy. And the only way to really be happy is to not look at this thing as a source of happiness. It's not that we can't look at it as something we can use in Krishna service. The problem is looking at it as the source of our pleasure. If we look at it as the thing which we need in order to be happy, that is a mistake. We can take it and we can use it in Krishna service, and that will become the source of our happiness, using it in Krishna service. And when we use things in Krishna service, then things are rightfully used. The earth is satisfied. The needs become much less. And Krishna is so easily satisfied. He says, Patram Pushpantalam. He doesn't need big this and big that. He only needs a leaf, a fruit, a flower, water. He has everything else. All this is his already. We're just messing with it, making a mess out of it. So for New Year's Eve, if we want to make good, they say we can make a New Year's resolution. The lifespan of an average New Year's resolution is about 30 days. But we can try to expand that by making a New Year's resolution that I'm going to look inside my heart. I'm going to try to understand where lust is hiding in my heart. That I try to fix everything by repairing something or buying something is not going to make me happy. And so I need to get to that. I need to understand that even the most subtle massage of my false ego is not going to make me happy. And if I'm looking for true happiness, I have to understand who I am, and I have to understand my ultimate connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, a king like Maharaj Yudhisthira, who was the personality, I read that already. His motto of administration was all good for the citizens, for as personified goodness he knew perfectly well what is actually good for them. He conducted the administration on that principle and not on the Rakshashi demoniac principle of sense gratification. As an ideal king, he had no personal ambition, and there was no place for sense gratification because all his senses at all times were engaged in the loving service of the Supreme Lord, which includes the partial service to the living beings who form the parts and parcels of the complete whole. This is a very important realization because it shouldn't be understood in such a way that we're deprived of sense gratification and therefore we become happy. It's not a deprivation of sense gratification that makes us happy. It's an understanding that sense gratification is not the source of our happiness. And so even if we have sense gratification, even though things may make us physically comfortable, we can be miserable. Many rich people are very miserable. They have multi-millions of dollars and they think they're happy, but they're really miserable. And many of them kill themselves and many of them kill others trying to be happy. So it's not sense gratification that makes you happy, nor is it deprivation of sense gratification that makes you happy. It's the proper use of the senses and the proper use of the materials that Krishna has given us in his service that makes us happy. If we have no desire or no illusion that these things are there for our pleasure. And that's the source of our happiness. Our source of happiness is making Krishna happy, making our spiritual master happy. And when we do that, then automatically become satisfied. The material things become either supportive of not supportive of that, but they themselves are not the cause of happiness. And that realization is essential to the living entity. And sometimes it gets very, very subtle. With Yudhisthira, it was so subtle. And he had to go to very, very saintly persons, like, well, Krishna himself and grandfather Bhishma, who was a Mahajan. He had to hear from them because they had such a clear understanding of the nature of sense enjoyment that they were able to pinpoint the problem and fix it. But if we try to fix it in the wrong way, then we just make it worse. So we don't want people to renounce prematurely. We don't want them to hate the objects of the senses. We want them to understand their relationship with Krishna. And then they'll know what to do with the objects of the senses. Then they'll be able to find what really makes them happy. And that's the only way they're going to find what really makes them happy. Those who are busy rendering service to the parts and parcels, leaving aside the whole, only spoil time and energy, as one does when watering the leaves of a tree without watering the root. If water is poured on the root, the leaves are enlivened perfectly and automatically, as we see Mataji every day outside watering the plants. Because she knows you have to water them, and you can't water the leaves, you have to water the root. But if water is poured on the leaves only, the whole energy is spoiled. Maharaj Yudhisthira, therefore, was constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, and thus the parts and parcels of the Lord, the living entities under his careful administration, were perfectly attended with all comforts in this life and all progress in the next. So you see that under the perfect admin of Maharaj Yudhisthira, everybody had what they needed physically, mentally, and spiritually. It's not that they were living in poverty. People think, oh, India is, poverty stricken, or they used to think India is poverty stricken, because the wealth of India was spiritual. Therefore, material wealth didn't have to be extravagant. It didn't have to glitter like gold. It didn't have to be in your face. It was something that could be simple, but it was satisfying, and people were happy. Now people have the glitter, the glitz, the shining light, the flashing this and that, all those dead bodies hanging from the hooks in the stores, and they're miserable. And the wealth that used to be there has been stolen. It's gone, and we don't appreciate it. And if we want it, we have to pay through the years for it. So then we have to work very hard to get the money to pay for things that originally were naturally available, but now are being marketed. Right? We have to market food that is not or processed. Organic food grows organically. That's what food does. If you put the seeds in the ground and you keep it clean, it grows. But instead now, all the food is being grown with chemicals. And if you want food that isn't grown with chemicals, you have to pay more for it. It's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? Because it's the commodity that's not really available anymore. Everything has been spoiled by our greed. We think it'll be more and it'll be bigger. And where I live, there's a lot of farming. In 3 months of the year, it's all concentrated because the rest of the year it's cold and nothing grows. So in the 3 months of the year with farming, everybody it's out in the garden and everybody wants to grow. People have started growing stuff in their own garden because that which is available in the supermarket is so contaminated. So for those 3 months, everybody grows and grows and grows. But the companies that use chemical fertilizers, they grow broccoli that's literally this big. And so people think, I can buy this big broccoli, it'll last me for so long. I can, it's like extra special, huge. And it's not even, has no nutritional value whatsoever. And it's funny because on the outside of it, it's very green. But when you cut the top off, the bottom is yellow. There's no nutrition there, but it's really big. So that's our judgment. We want it bigger and bigger and better and showier and brighter and louder, and but it has no substance. It has no substance. And the last sentence of this purport. Maharaj Yudhisthira, therefore, was constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, and thus the parts and parcel of the Lord, the living beings, under his careful administration, were perfectly attended with all comforts of this life and all progress in the next. This is the way of perfect management of state administration. And for those of us who happen to be in charge of somebody or are responsible, I was just reading, I do this reading every week. I was reading part of the Valamra to be recorded, and I'm sending some. But this is what Prabhupada said: if you serve Krishna, then everything you need will be provided. And if it isn't provided, it means you don't need it. So you don't have, everything you need will come easily, will be provided for you by Krishna. By sincere endeavor, sincere prayer, everything you need will be provided by the Supreme Lord, who's the master of everything. So I should stop there. I'm already over time. Please forgive me for running over. Do we have time for questions? I don't know what time we close turn into. Anybody have any questions, comments?
No. Comments.
Comment.
5-star for 5-star. Talking about the rating systems also. 5. For you? Yes.
You want me to make comment?
No.
Oh,
She's asking very good. Sorry.
I think he's just thanking you.
Brother, it's way of communication. If you don't know how to communicate, then leave the place. Right?
It's true.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. Hare
Yes,
Krishna.
thank you so much. Now you guys first.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Anybody else?
If you ask questions to this person, what do you understand?
Yes. Okay.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Mataji, like you were telling about this class was mainly about the growth and subtleness. So like in scriptures also it is mentioned like Grihastha ashram is like a deep dark well. So Mataji, like I was not able to understand, but after marriage it's like things are getting a little bit difficult, Mataji, like to follow the proper standards. It's getting very much difficult. So but I have a great desire, but sometimes it's very difficult. It becomes very difficult. So how to uh, uh, make up the mind so that get strength so that I'll be able to follow all the rules and regulations very strictly.
This is an age-old question. It comes up again and again and again. It's not an easy question to answer practically, but it's an easy question to answer theoretically. First of all, I'll say that 90% of Lord Chaitanya's close associates were Grihastas. And ISKCON is supported by the Grihasta ashram. And society is supposed to, but according to the Shastra, society is supposed to be supported by those in the Grihasta ashram. So as much as we want to maybe badmouth the Grihasta ashram, we're dependent on it, and it's part of society. Krishna created it, and it's there because in order to learn deeply the things we need to learn, we have to go through certain phases of life. It's very few people that can actually go from the here to the end without going through the middle. And we saw when I first became a devotee, many young men thought, oh yes, I can take sannyas at 19, 20, 21, and hardly any of them made it. And they were all sincere. It's not like they were sham or they were nonsense or they were lying. They were trying, but they were trying to run before they knew how to walk. So we learned lessons during the Grihasta ashram, and one of them is that responsibility is a heavy burden. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take responsibility. Prabhupada didn't have to. He often said, and actually the last reading I did before this one was Prabhupada was saying that I'm an old man. I could easily say, I don't want to do this anymore. So much work and so many people doing nonsense, and I have to keep track of everybody all over the world now, and I don't even have a cell phone. And say that the fact of the matter is he didn't have a cell phone. And so his management responsibilities became very burdensome on him, and he repeatedly begged us to please take the responsibility off his shoulders. But every time he would put the responsibility on someone else's shoulder who was only at the oldest 11 years old, they would make a mistake, and then someone would come and cry to him and complain to him and say, this guy, he's doing it, but he's not doing it right. I need you to do it. And so Prabhupada couldn't get the responsibility off his shoulder. But sometimes Krishna does it, and he, like Prabhupada, he left. what to do. You have to take responsibility. If you don't know how, learn how. And if you don't learn the easy way, then you'll learn the hard way. But you have to, you have to kick some, very often in Florida, children have to learn how to swim because there's swimming facility everywhere. And if they don't, they'll drown, right? So you teach child to how to swim very early, like his infant. And one of the ways is to throw them in the water. And when you think of that, you think, well, how do they do that? But they throw them in the water at a certain age and the very young age, and the child automatically learns. It's like a reflex. He learns, don't breathe underwater. That's no. And then he automatically floats to the top, and he becomes less fearful of water. And from then on, he can be taught how to swim. So sometimes hardships are necessary, difficulties are necessary, and learning how to figure them out, how to make them work for us, is the result that comes from those difficulties, and that's also necessary. So at different stages of our life, we may have different things that take most of our time physically, like work takes this much time, and spiritual life may only take this much time. But that means quality. That means I have to really work on somehow getting the spiritual part of my life to take quality time and do it right, because the bulk of my time is spent doing this other thing that I have to do because I have responsibility. I'm sure Yudhisthira, he wasn't thinking, this is fun. If you know the sequence of the Bhagavatam, what happens is Yudhisthira Maharaj, when he finally agrees that, okay, I have to take the kingdom, the first thing he does is check out Maharaj Pariksit. He has astrologers come and he goes through this whole huge thing and tell me if this guy is, because he's the only living relative. I want to know that he's qualified, because as soon as he's old enough, I'm out of here. And he wouldn't, every king, we hear it again and again, if they don't have sons, they're like frantic, because the son is the person who's supposed to take over the responsibility. And if they don't have anyone to take it over, then they're forced to take it over, to keep it. And then it becomes a burden. So their idea is that this is going to make me happy. I'm going to do it as long as I possibly can. Prabhupada used to bring it juxtaposed to the rulers now, the president. But they can't get the guy out of the office. They have to throw him out. Gangs have to come and throw the guy out, burn down his house, and chase him out of the country. And because he wants to stay in forever. And if he doesn't stay in, then his relatives will stay in. But the motivation is that this is my turf, and I want to keep my turf as long as I can. But this wasn't the attitude of Maharaj Yudhisthira. And Maharaj Pariksit, as soon as they found out he had 7 days to live, he said, I'm gone. See you guys later. And he immediately went to here. He didn't think, what's on my bucket list? Let me see if I can fit anything in. He just immediately, he thought, no, I just have to hear about this. So you and everybody of us, really, we need to look at the time in our life. I was talking the other day about where we are on the Changing Bodies exhibit. We have to talk about where we are on the Changing Bodies exhibit. Think, and where does my time, where's the bulk of my physical time? But my spiritual time, I have to give it quality, because the purification is taking place. And I'm also moving on that trajectory. I'm going down the conveyor belt. And if I want to become a devotee at the end, then I have to do what I have to do here. And at the end, I become a devotee. And because of the purity that's happening by my sacrifice, by my austerity, and by my chanting, by my determined effort, the determined effort, right? Patra pushpam phalam toyam. But bhakti is what is the addition. Flowers aren't hard, fruits aren't hard, but bhakti is hard. And bhakti comes from the purification that comes from this. So whatever little time you have, make it the most valuable time. And don't get angry at the responsibilities you have. Just do them for Krishna. do them as part of your trajectory to go to the right place at the end of your life. This is part of that. Good question. Okay. Yes, I'm all written down.
I don't know if you have the time, but then, yeah, I just asked quickly. So, first of all, thank you, Mataji, for a very, I would say, pertinent class on a New Year day. Very good. It does a lot for us to think and reflect. So, you mentioned one sentence that finding happiness, it requires removing, even the traces of lust that's there in the heart. And it is very interesting to note that a personality like Mahan and Yudhishthir, of course, I mean, for I would say for our own destruction, the point of having a holier than thou conception of oneself, even that is very finely, I would say, very form of lust. That's very, I would say, in one sense, it's also very sobering that this can be. My specific question is, and you also were saying that the only way out is association of saintly people. So my question is, could there be also a possibility that when such a person is coming to a saintly person for guidance, for advice, there could be an inadvertent, attitude of lust from the person giving advice, that it's like they might be telling the right thing, but at the same time they might be telling for the wrong reason. For example, I just want to have more people to work for me. I have a lot of services to be done, and then I, as a person in a position of responsibility, I quote the right shlokas, I say the right things, but not in the right spirit. That kind of the person who is taking advice senses it. That, so what to do in such a situation?
Okay, I'm going to tell you a little story. Maybe I've told it before in your presence, I'm not sure. But it's a true story, and I was there for it. There was a woman, anyway, she got initiated by Srila Prabhupada, and she got married by Srila Prabhupada. And she married a person who was a sannyasi before in New York. And she lied to the devotees, and she said that she was the heir to the Toyota fortune. But that wasn't true. She was speaking falsely. But no one knew it. And because she had married this very senior devotee who had a lot of respect from the community, she moved into the temple, and she was a terror. She was ordering people about all the time. She would come into Mangal Arti in her program with slippers on and her pajamas. And she demanded that people would put a chair for her to sit. And she was very rude to the other devotees. And she was doing things for the deities, Radha Govinda, that were not acceptable. She was offering them things that were unofferable. And the devotees didn't know what to do, but they also knew that Radha Govinda had to be taken care of, and the preaching had to go on. So they did their service. And they took her orders, even though her orders were often administered in a very obnoxious way. And even people were thrown out of the temple for not following her, and they just left. They did it. When she threw them out, they went away. But eventually, some older devotees did something, and it went to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada blew the whole thing through the roof. But it took a while. It didn't happen immediately. And Prabhupada, his reaction was very interesting. First of all, he called the people who were in charge. And the people who were in charge, he was furious. Because he said, you're in charge. You have to make sure everybody's happy, everybody's going smoothly. How did you allow this to go on? And why didn't you talk to me about it earlier? And so he was angry with them because he felt that as administrators, they should have taken action. But to the average devotees in the temple, he was completely gratitude. That's the only attitude that he had. He was totally grateful that they had continued to do their service under such adverse situations, and that they didn't complain, they just had faith that Krishna would clear the situation eventually, but their job was to do their service, to keep the temple running, to keep the books going, to keep Radha Govinda taken care of nicely. And they just kept serving, even though the atmosphere was hellish, and they knew it. It wasn't that they didn't know it, they knew it, but they didn't feel that they, in their position, could do anything about it. And again, it comes down to Swastiastu Vishwasi Paloprasiddhatam, that let me wish that everybody becomes spiritually advanced. Let everybody take up the process of bhakti, because by practicing bhakti, their hearts will become purified. And even if there are difficulties, even if there are good advice given for the wrong reason, if it's good advice for me, then don't mix my wrong reason and for not doing it in with their wrong reason for giving it. Then let me just take the nectar and leave the not nectar, and I will make spiritual advancement because I'm pleasing my guru, not because I'm, doing the right thing and I'm so good at it and I know that this guy's in Maya, but I'm going to ignore his Maya and I'm going to be a pure devotee. No, not it for any of those reasons, but because I know that this needs to be done for my spiritual master. The advice is good advice. Even if it's coming from a dirty place, let me take it because I can see, I have intelligence. Bilvamangal Thakur heard from Chintamani. She was a prostitute. Prostitutes aren't generally considered to be spiritual mentors. But she told him, if you had as much attraction from Krishna as you had from me, then your life would be perfect. And somehow or other, that information entered his ear and he took it seriously. And even though he took it seriously, it wasn't sufficient. He had still problems. He had to take some drastic measures. He poked out his eyes. But nevertheless, he attributed Chintamani as his guru. That book that you gave me has a whole chapter in the front, prayer to Chintamani, thanking her for giving him the advice that, go get out of here. So the advice was coming from a bad source, but it was good advice. And he had the intelligence to take the nectar and leave the water. That's one answer. The second answer is watch your eyeballs. Because if you see fault in everybody, you're going to suffer in spiritual life. So it's better not to go there. You see some difficulty, everybody has difficulty. And until you're a Srila Prabhupada, until you're Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, until you're Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, until you're Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and don't ask them, because if you ask them if they have any problems, they'll tell you I'm full of problems. But we look at them and we see they're pure devotees. Why? Not because they didn't ever make mistakes, but because they were 100% dedicated to Krishna. And they took their mistakes and they purified them by the process that Krishna has given us. And in the long run, they were successful. So wish them well. In your heart, wish them well. Take pure instruction and embrace it. And leave the fault finding to somebody else. So I should end here because it's getting late. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much for tolerating me for so long. And but I hate to tell you that, but I hope to see you again because I'm just going up there for 3 weeks and then I'll be coming back. Hopefully I'll be rejuvenated. All my problems will be finished and become more, but that's probably it.
Mataji, and I request all our devotees. We have a New Year, not so much a surprise, but a small offering of love, a gift from Mataji. It's something Mataji knows what it is, but then it just came on New Year's Day. And can we call Devanatha Mataji?
Prabhuji,
We just have a small.
I have a request. I have a request that I get 2 of these garments to take with me up the hill. Is it possible? To the Shabbat.
There is, sure,
I'd like to take 2
Oh, sure.
garments from here.
any,
Believe it or not, as much as they growing stuff, it's really hard to find flowers.
the government message it to me. As a wonderful gift, so we don't have all of the devotees here, we just have a tiny fraction of a congregation, but on behalf of all of them, like we just wanted to. All of us can. Offer this.
Mosquito machines?